All moving systems are flow systems. I said that to my children who are 8 and 12 as they rejected and rolled their eyes when I gave them design for flow advice about how to swim. Now, before I share with you any more information on swimming, I think there's a few things you ought to know about me. I am not a competitive swimmer, never have been. In fact, I learned how to swim as an adult so I could do one important thing, and that is pass the minimum water survival requirements needed to fly aircraft off of this flow system, an aircraft carrier at sea. Now, I learned a lot about flow and flow systems from my experience flying aircraft, being a maverick, flying air shows, flying in combat, doing a lot of work with counterterrorism and counterpiracy. I also learned a lot about flow systems and flow working with the Toyota production system, and learning a lot about lean and coaching Agile and coaching resilience and coaching safety. So, I have to ask, are there any swimmers out there? Just 3? Interesting. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about swimming. For the swimmers out there, you may be thinking that the design for flow advice I gave my children has everything to do with streamlining their body, correct? The how and why. Now, streamlining your body is a fundamental flow concept that helps you reduce the drag or friction your body has when you're in the water and in between strokes. But that's not the flow for design advice I gave them, the design for flow advice I gave them about swimming. The advice I gave them was this: you should spread your fingers slightly when you do your strokes. My kids looked at me, they laughed, and they said, "Daddy, we've seen you swim." And they said, "Dad, our coach teaches us to swim fingers closed." Everybody knows that, right? Correct? Everybody knows you swim fingers closed? I showed them this. And I said, you know what? Let's take a look at the Google box real fast and see what the Google box has to say. Search around the internet. And sure enough, we found that elite swimmers are starting to swim fingers open. Now, why is this? It's a simple fundamental flow concept. What it does is it allows the swimmer to reconfigure their fingers, the design of their hand, so that water flows through it, and it creates what is known as a water glove, so they can push downward on the water with greater force and accelerate through the water. So everybody knows this, right? Okay. So that's what I told my children, and they're like, okay, we'll give it a shot, Dad. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So you may be sitting there going, why are we talking about swimming, right? What is this nonsense about swimming? Well, I have to tell you something about swimming. Swimming is a flow system, just as your business and your organization is a flow system. What else is a flow system? Who here took the metro to get in here today? Yeah, that's a flow system. The Danube River, the trees by the river, this city, the streets, and guess what? You and I are flow systems. Now, there's a law of physics that says everything is a flow system. Everything that moves is a flow system. And it is called the constructal law. And the constructal law says that there are 2 features of all flow systems. There's the current and the design. Now, currents can be anything from information, knowledge, it could be products, it could be a nasty virus that's spreading around the world right now. And it could be the value that you deliver to your customers. So, the constructal law really says this. It says that for any flow system to survive and thrive, the design needs to evolve, and that allows the currents to flow faster and better through the system. So, I told you I flew aircraft years and years and years ago. Everybody's been on an aircraft here, so let me use that as a metaphor to kind of explain how to look at your organization. Now, there are 4 forces acting on an aircraft at any given time in flight. And those 4 forces are weight, lift, drag, and thrust. Now, weight changes a lot when you're flying an aircraft. The fuel moves around, you burn off the fuel, people move around, luggage changes. In your organization, things are changing like that as well. But there's something special about an aircraft, and in your organization as well, and that is the center of gravity. And that's the balance point, or the point that the aircraft would pivot in the center, and the center of that, the force always goes directly to the center of the Earth. I bet you have a center of gravity in your organization, and I call them customers, right? That's where your focus should be. So to counteract this force of weight, we have this force of lift. And this force of lift is distributed across the wings. If you think about it, your organization needs distributed lift as well. And that can be done through decentralized execution, decision-making, and a network of teams. Now, drag, this is fun, drag is what prevents the aircraft from moving forward. And I'm sure you have that in your organization as well. And there's something special about drag in an aircraft called parasitic drag, like a parasite. It's friction. And this is really about what the aircraft is made of and the design or configuration of the aircraft. Now, you have parasitic drag in your organization as well. And that parasitic drag comes in several forms. For example, previous experience. We are all pattern matching beings. Next, we have cultural traditions. We have different cultures when we go to different places around the world. And we also have genetic heritage, things like ego, fear, heuristic biases, the desire to drive everything to order. And of course, we all love simplistic recipes, don't we? Do these 5 things and you'll be successful, correct? Now, opposing drag is something known as thrust. And thrust can be created in your organization by 2 ways. It can be created by implicit guidance and control, and I'm going to come up with another one here. Stand by. It's intrinsic motivation, and of course, intent. And intent is really about discovering or designing your future, deciding what that success criteria is out there, creating a journey map, if you will, or defining the mission purpose of your organization for a couple simple reasons. You want your people to be able to make decisions as the environment changes. And of course, if your people understand the intent of what you're trying to do, and if they're challenged by the work, and if they're motivated by self-interest, not extrinsic rewards, this is something known as optimal experience. Has anybody heard of an optimal experience before? It has a name, and that name is flow. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi identified that people are more creative, productive, and happier if they're in a state of flow. And you've heard about this, correct? Awesome. Now, it's really cool to be here to talk about Design for Flow, where the notion of flow is really born here in Hungary. So you may be asking yourself, hey, we're talking about flow and flow systems. They happen to be everywhere. And my children will tell you, everything that moves is a flow system. So what does all this mean? Well, if we look at our organizations as flow systems, we can then build a new lens to look at new ways to create better ways of working. We can make better decisions, we can make more sense of the world, and of course, we can deliver more value to our center of gravity, our customers, correct? Now, if we do look at organizations and businesses as flow systems, something else happens, and that is we start to see similarities between things like design thinking, new ways of working in Agile and Lean, new ways of working in resilience, safety, and innovation. So I think right about now you're wondering, what happened to your kids after they started swimming with their hands or their fingers open? Well, like any business that designs for flow, they started to win. Now, I know we're flying through this right now, and I want you to walk out of here with some type of value. So if you want to design your future, I think I'm going to share with you a few secrets on how we do this when we design for flow. The first thing you need to do is identify your customer, correct? Then you can find your stakeholders, you can find your users, and then you need to create some type of map. And why do we develop a map? Well, that tells us the direction of journey we're going on. And we can also create stories around that map. And you heard from Ofer earlier, and you heard from Grant earlier about the journeys that we need to take. The next thing we need to do is we need to develop a new performance management program in our organization. And what that means is we need to stop rewarding individual behavior and start rewarding team behavior. And as leaders, you're going to have to do something very, very difficult. And that's really tell people, I don't know. And it's okay. What this does, it helps create psychological safety. And as many of you may know, psychological safety is the most important component in developing a high-performing organizations. Another way to create psychological safety is to stand up in front of your peers, your subordinates, and say, I screwed up. I made a mistake. And that's hard to do. Something else we can do is we need to develop our high-performing teams. Now, this sounds funny, but in aviation, we had to do it this way. We learned to talk to each other. We learned to hand things off to each other. We learned to plan, we learned to brief, and more importantly, we learned how to debrief. These are non-technical soft skills that every organization needs to develop. But right now, I guarantee you, you're not doing that. And a team, really, when you think about it, is a flow system. And it's a special type of flow system. It's a complex adaptive system. And what we know about complex adaptive systems is that it's the interactions, not the quality of the agents, but the interactions that matter more than anything. So those are a few pieces of the design for flow I can give you so you can go out there and design your future. So thank you very much. Good luck on designing your future. And remember, design for flow.